Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to part 3 of our industrial brick series. Today's episode is going to be all about the mysterious cold brick. Where the cold brick differs from the industrial sauna and the dirty brick is in its temperature. As you can see, this brick right now is hovering around minus 218 degrees. And it's for that reason that you have to fill it with hydrogen. Hydrogen doesn't condense until minus 252. So we're using 2 pairs of thermo aqua tuners running in series with coolant loops filled with supercoolant to keep that temperature that far down. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have to use 4 total aqua tuners to implement this. The only reason we did is because this cold brick is really large. But I feel fairly confident, depending on how much heat you're producing in here, you could probably get away with 2. Now, at the beginning of this episode, I said this is probably one of the most complicated to implement. And one of the reasons is because of the materials you're going to need. Because this room is so cold, the interior of the liquid lock is filled with none other than supercoolant. And the reason why we use supercoolant is because it doesn't freeze until minus 271. So why would you use a method like this? Well, remember in our dirty brick episode that all the polluted water and the carbon dioxide that we were dealing with, we had to do something with it. In this case, we don't. All the polluted water that comes out of here instantly solidifies into ice, and even the carbon dioxide that's coming out of the natural gas generators, once again, instantly solidifies. Now in this case, we're even taking that frozen carbon dioxide and loading it in with either auto sweepers or our friend Sweepy, and then feeding it once again to a slickster ranch. But in this case, we have to turn all that frozen carbon dioxide into carbon dioxide that the slicksters can use and also not freeze in. So we have a couple of space heaters that keeps this area nice and warm. But in that same way, you could take all the polluted ice and you could send it into another system that heats it, turns it into polluted water, and then into steam, and then once again into a raindropper to turn it into pure water. Just like with our other 2 styles of bricks, you have a lot of options of what you're going to do with this system. You may have noticed that there's a robo miner that's able to reach each petroleum generator, and that's the same for both sides. And the reason for this is because the longer the petroleum sits in the machine itself, the colder it's going to get. So if for some reason you're not using enough power to where these petroleum generators have to be on a certain amount of time, they'll freeze in the tile, which is why we have the RoboMiner here. As soon as it ejects the frozen petroleum, the RoboMiner zaps it and the machine can keep doing its business. Now, I've built a couple of cold bricks that didn't need to use RoboMiners, but none of them had a petroleum generator. It's all going to be dependent on how quick you're using that power. It's also for that reason any buffer tanks that you have supplying, for instance, the petroleum for the petroleum generators in this example, need to be on the outside of the cold brick. Otherwise, once again, all that petroleum will eventually freeze, creating more problems than it's worth. Some other contingencies is you want to be using some pretty good insulated piping to hold all the petroleum going to your petroleum generators. That way, it can't freeze in their pipes either. Before we go check out another cold brick type, I wanted to highlight this 3-way vacuumed out joint plate connection system. Absolutely beautiful. Oh, look at that. With the power of debug mode, I've just turned it into a 4-way. Now I know that system was a bit of a monstrosity, but here's one that's much smaller that may work for you in your colony. Already, this room is down to about a minus 165 degrees. But it's doing the exact same thing as the other cold brick. It's creating a bunch of polluted ice, a bunch of power from the petroleum, and even natural gas. Take note though that we still put in a couple of robo-miners just in case anything decided to freeze because we weren't using the ingredients quick enough. Another difference in this setup is that we built it around a copper volcano. As soon as this volcano erupts, all that copper solidifies. Now we don't leave it sitting on the neutronium because neutronium, just like abyssalite, has no thermal conductivity. Instead, we pick it up with an auto sweeper, dump it off into this conveyor loader, which drops it just a couple of tiles over, and you can see all the copper is sitting here at around minus 160 degrees. Once again, we have supercoolant on the interior of the liquid lock and water on the exterior. You'll notice though, we built this one directly into the side of a biome that was being covered with abyssalite, a pretty nice use of space. And because of that, we had to put our steam turbines on the side, which is not a big deal at all, especially considering we're not worried about heat in this brick. In fact, we're just injecting chill. We have 2 thermo aqua tuners using supercoolant set up in series to be able to provide that chill, and then the last thermo aqua tuner is just to keep these steam turbines cool. Once again, we have a nice vacuumed out joint plate lock to prevent any of the heat here exchanging with the heat here. Remember that last cold brick actually had 4 thermo aqua tuners set up in 2 pairs running in series. We didn't need that here because we're just not generating that much heat. But take note that these steam turbines are running pretty much flat out in order to keep all these thermo aqua tuners cool. If I were to do this one again, I'd probably add a 3rd steam turbine. Typically, you want at least 1 for every thermo aqua tuner. Another good practice to use inside your cold bricks is the use of a buffer tank. I mean, seriously, did you expect me to go an entire episode without talking about a buffer tank? But in this case, the buffer tank is actually connected to our coolant loop. As a temperature stabilizer, while it's a little difficult to see through the pipe spaghetti, the coolant's coming in, going right into the buffer tank before being re-chilled and going back out. Now, ideally, I'd probably have that buffer tank after the thermo aqua tuners chilled it, and that way all the supercoolant was being stored at its coldest, but this is still effective and just the way this particular implementation turned out. So the question then resides, why use a cold brick versus a hot brick, aka the industrial sauna, or its middle ground cousin, the dirty brick? And to tell you the truth, I can't answer that question. In our Max Paradise run, we just did it for the memes. When you're nearing in at Cycle 2000, sometimes you do things just to do them. Especially when you take into account the amount of materials it takes to build these things. Although one good point for the cold brick is, you don't have to build things out of steel. In fact, these natural gas generators are built out of copper ore. No machine has a freezing temperature limit, only an overheat temperature limit. So then maybe it's because you're trying to conserve your steel that you'd put in a cold brick. But you'd still actually need the steel for your thermo aqua tuners, and you 100% need supercoolant. And chances are, if you have this much supercoolant laying around, your steel production's doing plenty fine. So this marks the end of our industrial brick series. We started off with the relatively easy industrial sauna. Take water, add heat, you get steam. Trap it in with a couple of liquid locks, throw all your machines that generate heat, and away you go. And then we took a look at the very versatile dirty brick that doesn't matter what you throw in here. As long as you keep its temperatures under control and you have a plan to handle the gas pressure, the dirty brick's gonna work for you. And maybe you're a late game memester and you just like the idea of freezing tons of materials and then shipping that ice all around your colonies. And in that case, well, the cold brick's for you. I'm looking forward to reading in the comments of what you thought of each part of this industrial brick series, and specifically the cold brick episode. And while we categorized the industrial bricks into 3 basic types with many variants among them, there might be a mysterious 4th that I just haven't thought of yet. Have you? So until next time, I'll talk to you soon.